All right. Welcome everybody for joining. Excited to get into this, and really excited for this conversation. I'll give a little brief intro of Stefan. I'm sure he'll do a much better job of me of describing his journey. But over 20 years at Nike, including a bunch of different positions there. One of my favorite titles of all time. Global digital innovation. That just sounds like person who gets to do cool stuff all the time. So I want to get into a little bit of that. But after leaving Nike, co-founder and current CEO of OMORPHO, uh, a company that I certainly love. Currently, obviously wearing my vest that I am in most days of the week. And the concept of microloading certainly revolutionizing, I think, apparel when it comes to not just fitness but everyday use, and we can get into that as well. But given all of that background, really excited to kind of chat with you and pick your brain a little bit on all of this stuff. So I really appreciate you carving out some time.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Thanks for having me.
I want to start with, I think first off, looking at just in general, like getting some definitions around some things, right? So, Omorpho is known for called, gravity sportswear and micro loading. Maybe just from your seat, if we can set the stage of like, how would you define that?
Simply as weighted training gear. The industry forever has been preaching, and I come from a place where the only thing that mattered was lightweight, right? Because it was just the perception that every ounce that you can take out of a product that's used for sports, whether that's a shoe or a shirt, makes the athlete go faster. If you're a runner who have lighter shoes, you're going to run faster, which makes sense when you compete. And that's sort of 1% of the time, 99% of the time you're training to get stronger, at which point resistance is good. So in the simplest way, I think what we have branded as gravity sportswear is simply weighted training gear.
Yeah, that's great. It was it was something that really jumped out at me, the idea that Nike is built around making things lighter, and you leave there and you're doing the opposite, which
Yeah,
yeah, that I mean that had to at
yeah.
least stick out to you at some point.
Well, it was an epiphany because when you work somewhere and you're told one thing and it makes complete sense. I mean, for elite athletes and for competitors on race day, it makes complete sense that lightweight is the only thing that matters. And Nike was founded on, you know, uh, by Bill Bowerman, the track coach, and Phil Knight, and they were runners, and they knew that if we can make this lighter, the run's going to go faster. Makes complete sense. And then that transcended everything the company ever did. It was like the cornerstone of what drove innovation was make it lighter. But what struck me and the epiphany was kind of, well, so you put on this super lightweight shirt and these super lightweight shoes, and you go to a gym and pick up a weight. And I go, well, that in that context, it makes absolutely no sense because the weight is completely irrelevant. Or you put on a super lightweight shoe and a super lightweight shirt, and you go run hill sprints with a parachute, or you know what I mean? So the
Yeah.
concept of adding load was always there. Swimmers would swim in a drag suit. Like I said, sprinters would sprint with a parachute. Cyclists would have a heavier bike. All those things to get stronger. And yet, the only thing that we made was super lightweight products. And I was like, wait, this makes absolutely no sense. So it's almost like what you wear when you train and what you wear when you compete are two completely different things. And when you train, load is good. So it was also very interesting. We started developing the product and went and started sourcing materials and fabrics. And we said, what's the heaviest you have? And our partners couldn't figure. They were like, well, what do you mean? Like we've been told for 40, 50 years that we should make it lighter. We don't have heavy stuff. And so we had to create heavy things to wear, right? Which in itself was an innovation.
Yeah, you mentioned swimming, and certainly that's my background as a swimmer in college. Even just in my collegiate time, the drag suits that we wore in training, I think, went from even those went from larger to smaller, I would say, by the time I was graduating. And it was very just experiencing that, and obviously getting some feedback from like our team, like what gear are we going to use and everything, and thinking about what it was like in training. There was a drag resistance component to it, but there was also something to the ratio of what you wanted when you were actually competing, right? And I think that that was something that struck me as a giant similarity, because that was where I was coming from the first time that I started wearing OMORPHO vest, and thinking about it's added weight, but it's not so disproportionate that it changes what I'm doing, right? And that was something that I felt in the water, competing for all those years, was when it got to like if I wear a pair of shorts literally in the pool, like my stroke is going to kind of go downhill, and then I'm training something that I'm not actually doing, right? And so
Yeah.
I think on the
Yeah.
weighted side, that was really something that was I found very similar in like how I came at this from my brain.
Yeah. The concept of what we call microloading is evenly distributed microweights that never get in the way of your natural motion. And what we saw early on, when we started developing this, when I kind of dug in, it was that it's not that weighted vests hadn't been around. They've been around forever, but they were incredibly poorly designed, or I shouldn't say that, poorly designed to be used in motion. They
Hmm.
were, if you wanted to load on 20, 30, 40 pounds and just walk in a straight line or just do a pull-up, it worked because it didn't, but when your body was in motion, in movement, cutting, jumping, those things would bump around. I can't tell you how many elite athletes we talked to. It's like, well, thank you for making a vest that I can finally wear that doesn't hurt me. Because they would, they had plates and they had things that jumped around, hits you in the head and the face. It's uncomfortable. It's chafing. They've never really been designed with comfort in mind. And just because you add load doesn't mean that you can take away the comfort and aesthetics if you want a broader consumer base to use it. So that for us was really, really important, this evenly distributed microload. And then the other thing is, rucking, which is just one of the most common misconceptions, and I hear it all the time. People are like, "Yeah, I wore my 10-pound weight vest and I went rucking." No, you didn't. Those are two different things.
Yeah.
Rucking, comes from Rucksack, which is German, which means backpack, which is you're loading more weight, and it's a great thing to do, but it's a different thing. It's
Yeah.
more weight, it's linear movement. You're oftentimes moving, over elevation. Um, but don't confuse that with working out with a weighted vest from, that is 10 pounds. That's not rucking. And I think that rucking is amazing, so there's no knock on that, and there's some amazing brands in that space. But that's not what we do. Where we come at it from is not load as much as you can and then go for a walk. This is no, you want to be able to move freely, and that's why we have so many athletes, right? And I think that is a big change, I think, in perception of how to use this in the most meaningful way.
Yeah, there's definitely the interesting reality of the usage, and I can speak to my own experience of this, of getting my G vest and putting it on. And I would say the two things that within probably 10 seconds that like I sort of jumped out, and I'm curious as to like maybe this is obviously the goal of like this is the importance on your side, or not, or if you hear this a lot, or what. But one thing was like right away it's like, oh, I can kind of do anything. Like that was even just like I think maybe even I didn't even perceive that as much as when you put it on. It's like, oh, I could do anything with this thing on. That was like maybe for me almost like startling. And the second thing was, um, I can feel the Nike in your resume, like and from a brand perspective, right? From a look and a feel. And I think if I in my head think about weighted clothing for training, I'm certainly not thinking about something that like I would ever wear like in public, or like going to
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Costco, or like anything, like it would no, like it
yeah,
would just be preposterous. It would
yeah,
look ridiculous. And
yeah,
that is it's just like jumped out when I put it on.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's really interesting when you think about the importance of aesthetics and what even when you work with performance products, and Nike at the time being so obsessed with serving athletes, you learn a lot, right? It's like, okay, well, what do they care about? And function is incredibly important. It's got to feel good. It's got to be, no distractions when you're moving. But form is equally important. If it doesn't look good, we used to say the first three things consumers care about is does it look good, does it look good, does it look good? And then it's got to feel good. That's like almost a given. So when we developed our product, I remember Natalie Candrian, our excellent designer, when we first met, and I asked her to help me. I said, I want you to design the most beautiful thing ever made. She said, yeah, first we're going to design something ugly that is comfortable, and then we're going to make it beautiful. And I was like, oh, interesting, because when you think about it, you always start with the aesthetics, but you work from the inside out and you make sure that this thing is so comfortable against your skin and it's washable and it moves with you. And she goes, and then you apply the form around that. But some people stop at the well, they don't even make it comfortable, in the space we've been in. It's just been, oh, we're just going to create something that's heavy that you can load on as much as you can, and then that'll be it. And they've only gotten 10% of the way in what the potential of this product could be.
Yeah, it makes me think of the Morpho name in general. And how did you
Yeah.
land on that?
Well, I wanted something. So Omorpho is Greek and means beautiful because I always felt like we make beautiful products and experiences and I don't know, it just came to me one day. I'm like, oh, that's I was thinking of Greek word. I speak the language. My mom's from Greece and I was like, I wanted something from the and it's in Greek, it's actually Omorpho. You pronounce it a different way, but here it becomes Amorpho, and I was also looking for something that we could actually trademark around the world because IP protection for what we do is important, as well as get the domain name for,
Yeah.
amorpho.com. It's really hard. If you look at any young company or startups these days, it's like you remove all the vowels from the word or you create some weird spelling because all the domain names are taken. And so we didn't want to do that. And now, granted, you can use other, endings than .com to it, but it's still the prevalent way of authenticating a brand. So anyway, long-winded story around the name, but we're very passionate about it. We love the circular nature of the word, and behind me you can see the G spheres, the MicroLoad on one of our shirts. There is a certain circular organic feel to the brand that also fits with how the name looks.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. It's funny we can like little sidebar when we were coming thinking of the name for Coya, um we obviously coach around our eight controllables. And then so, there was a while where there was some sort of like elevate was involved in maybe that, like, you're getting 1% better and there's eight controllables, so we're going to use the eight. And to your point, there was like, well, there's only 487 other things that are called elevate. And it's like, where, like, how is that going to fit? It's like, well, okay, what if
Yeah.
we went through the whole thing of like, what if we remove the vowels or put the letter in there? And then it's like, all right, we're really
Yeah.
forcing a square peg in a round hole with all these other
Yeah,
things
yeah, yeah.
around.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
then, yeah, you're right. Exactly.
yeah. One other quick sidebar. You mentioned Natalie. So much of your team at that level is female. What from like a design and all that standpoint, is that just how it turned out? Was that like a strategic thought process that you had, or how did that end up?
I've always believed that, you just surround yourself with the best people. And then it's people. And it doesn't matter, and it just so happened that we have, a lot of women on our team who are just amazing. And but that wasn't like we were seeking out, we
Yeah.
were just going, who's great. And Natalie then introduced me to Irina, and then who is amazing, leads product creation for us. And uh, so but so it's a great mix. We have people from, from all walks of life, and yes, it's really helped, I think. When you do that, you start with whoever is best at their craft. But when you have diversity in a group, everybody knows this, right? You're going to get stronger and you're going to get better. But I think it should come organically, you know. It wasn't like there's a quota or, you know, I think some companies force themselves into it, and I don't think that's good. I think you just start with the best people. We are so fortunate to have an unbelievable team, and it's a complete mix of people, and that's what makes it so strong.
Yeah, yeah. Um, let's get into a little bit of kind of some details on microloading. In general, what is kind of the thought process around like how heavy, like percentage of body weight, or how does that, how do you think about what, how did you land on the number one, and then how should consumers think about what's the right thing for them?
Yeah, it was we came at it two ways, right? One is the science of this, and I got introduced early on to Dr. Erin Fazer, who had been her PhD had been around this idea of how can you use small weights, load the limbs when you're running, sprinting, and then that's what eventually kind of we named microload. But Erin was, you know, was showing research that substantiated this idea we had that came more from an intuition. So she came at it through the science side, and you can see that it depends on what activity you do, but kind of 1 to 10% of your body mass, depending on the speed of how fast you're moving, is it can be effective. Um, and then the intuition side from said, what's comfortable to move? As an athlete, we're all very active on our team. We've been doing sports our whole lives. And we were trying it with some professional athletes, and we found that, well, when we started with the vest, we found that, 5 pounds for her, 10 pounds for him is a good weight where you can move without impeding your natural motion, but you load it enough that you can see real tangible results. For our apparel, it's even lighter. And the way we talk about this, it's almost like the faster you move and the more explosive your movement is, the less weight you need, right? Because you can imagine the limbs of 100-meter sprinter are moving extremely fast. You would not want to load 10% of their body weight to that. It would be enough to put just a few grams. And I'll share a quick story in a second about, Olympic legend Michael Johnson, who was one of our advisors, and I had a very interesting chat with him about this. But so the 1 to 10% is like, if you're just walking, and that my example to rucking in the before, you may load more than that if you're going in a straight line and you have very healthy joints and you don't have back problems and, overall strong, you can load more. But you don't need that much, especially if you're moving side laterally or in an explosive way. Then it's more important that the weight is close to your center of gravity, evenly distributed, and then you'll get the results. So therefore, it's hard to prescribe and say you should have exactly, because sometimes we get asked, what exactly should I have? Well, the answer is it depends, because it depends on how fast you're moving, what you do, what shape you're in, how healthy you are. So anyway, I'll come back to the 1 to 10%, which is a pretty broad range. But we always say start with a lower weight and then build up to something you're comfortable with where you feel like your body can handle it. So, so that's that side, and there's a whole section on our website around the science where we have white papers that break it down more and talk about like what change can you expect. There's also another side to this, in addition to the science, which is what happens in our minds, right? And the mental aspect of this, which is not to be underestimated. And here's where I'll come to the story that Michael was telling me. He said, when I prepared for the Atlanta Olympics, I mean, obviously he won the 200 and the 400, and I had just joined Nike, and he was wearing a gold shoe, and it was just one of the most epic moments in sports I think I'd ever seen, because he walked on to that, to the track, and everybody was like, "Whoa, what is that?" No one had ever ran in a gold shoe, and he wore it before the race, which is pretty. You're pretty confident.
Yeah.
But he told me this story. He said, I explained microloading to him, and I said, "This is how we're thinking about it. What do you think?" And he said, "It's amazing." He goes, "It makes complete sense." And I didn't call it microloading, but I did this 30 years ago. And he told me a story that he had had an Achilles problem. So in preparing for the Atlanta Olympics, during his track workouts, he wore a heavier Nike, like a regular training shoe called the Pegasus, which isn't, it's not a track spike, obviously. So it's not heavy, but it's way heavier than what they would normally use. And as his Achilles healed and ran his training runs, he realized that he was able to get the same split times with a heavier shoe. So he was like, well, I'm just going to continue run all my training in this and only wear my track spike on race day because it's lighter. And, so, and then he talked about the other thing that I mentioned, the mental aspect, because he said, because if in my mind, if I can run as fast as my competitors in a heavier shoe, I know I'm going to win in a lighter shoe. And
Yep.
so mentally, even if it was just a few grams, few ounces difference, that's enough when you're moving at the speed as an elite athlete, as he is, and all of them are right on that track. That is the difference. And so my whole point of this story is there is the weight, there is the percentages. We oftentimes get asked, what exactly should I wear? How much? Which really matters. And there is science for that. But never underestimate the mental side of this and how you feel and how it makes you feel lighter on race day. We say, train heavy so you can fly on race day, is kind of the mantra for it.
Man, that just resonates with me so much of swimming in college. And of course, being in college and being a swimmer, there's a time of year where there's the championship season and everybody's kind of focused on that. And all of my friends who are not swimmers, that also is the time of year where they get to make fun of me for shaving. And that was like our annual tradition that we got to do. And
Yeah.
their all thing was like, it cannot make you faster. Like, how much is that really improving? And it's so difficult to describe to somebody, like when you dive in the water first and it's like you have on the race suit and you feel like you are going 100 miles an hour. And like what that does when you can kind of like get that sensation of kind of losing a little bit of that, like losing the drag suit, losing the mental piece of it, and how that impacts like your aggression and like feel and confidence and all of those sort of things. It sort of like permeates everything. That adds up to making you go a lot faster. It's not simply about like, drag reduction and hydrodynamics and all of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, I'm I want to talk about a couple use cases because specifically the ability to move with microloading is unique. And also the again, I think about like the ability to kind of like wear it in different situations is unique. And so for me, there's kind of like three maybe buckets I want to jump into. Like first, just walking, and then second, running, and then fitness, because it seems like all three are applicable in this situation and potentially different benefits. Actually, I would add a fourth because I find myself sometimes like just going my day and I'm not doing anything in particular from a training perspective. Like I'll just have it on just to wear it throughout the day. And maybe I'm like going to get the mail or whatever, and I'm just having it on, which I guess sort of fits into walking. But if we go into those three and we start just on the walking side of things, for people that maybe getting back on the journey of fitness or maybe haven't been keeping up and now kind of doing that. I'm curious where you would say from a benefit to that use case in particular.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we kind of break it down that way when we think about the solutions we do. We kind of look at it through run, walk, train, and walking is one of those things where you um, first of all, the benefits of it are remarkable, and that's something that took me quite some time. But it's really interesting when you hear people like Dr. Huberman talk about and express the benefits of it. And then by adding a little bit of load, by increasing the intensity, you're putting a little bit more load to your joints and tendons, which can help with, preventing bone density loss and overall, it challenged you a little bit more cardiovascularly. Your body works just a little bit harder. For that, as we talked about that type of movement, you can load up quite a bit. And that's why we've developed the G-Vest icon that, has the snap-ins that you can double the weight of the vest if you want. So if you're walking, for men, it can go up to 20 pounds, and for women up to 12 pounds, or even 13 for our larger sizes. So that's quite a bit of load, right? But you'd be surprised, and for someone who hasn't worn it, when you pick up the product fully loaded, you're like, whoa, wait,
Mhm.
this is a lot of weight. And then you put it on, and you're like, wait, what happened? It just felt like it disappeared because it is distributed and it's so snug because we have the side cinches and then you can walk, and during your walk, we best describe it as the best thing is we've done our job when you almost forget that it's there. And then you come home and you take it off and you go, wait, I'm so light. Did I wear all this weight? And the same thing actually happens across all activities. But that's where we would say go the heaviest. That is when you're walking because your body can handle it, right? The load when you're running, and you do explosive movement, the stress on your joints is just completely different.
Yeah, yeah, I think that that makes sense and is something I think that comes up that can come up in so many different moments and spaces and places for people, and it's kind of it's an easy way of doubling and tripling down on the benefits of something that you're potentially already doing that it doesn't sort of like get in the way, right? You don't have to change or stop what you're doing. Um, I have found myself, I've gone on a run with this. Um, and I will say two things. One is there's the clothing component to obviously the business versus the vest in particular. And I've gone on runs with both of them. And it's first off, it's kind of remarkable how much the vest doesn't move. And so like it makes running like you actually possible instead of like this is just not I'm not going to do this.
Yeah.
Um, but when you, what was kind of like the thought process, or maybe like from a benefit standpoint of going the route of also the clothing, and the benefits? Were there use cases that are specific there, or was it continuing to add to the line?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And yeah, I started talking about walking, and adding more load, which makes sense. And I will say I mean, there are people like on the men's side, for instance, I mentioned the 20-pound vest. We have guys who run in the 20-pound vest, fully loaded, and maybe you did, I don't know, but they are, extremely well trained, like in fantastic physical condition, and they don't go run 10 kilometers in it. They'll do hill sprints or
Yeah.
something where you really want to create the load, and you can do that, right? You can absolutely do that, but if you're an everyday athlete, then you really need to be careful. And what we saw was that having a range of product that ranges from under a pound of weight up to 20 pounds of weight gives people option and depending on what they do. So to your point, where the idea of weighted apparel came from was also we started looking at ankle weights and wrist weights that have been around forever too, just like weight vests. And we started trying them and we felt these are really, really uncomfortable. I mean, many of them are bulky. And if you're doing very static movement, maybe if you're doing yoga or to some extent Pilates, you could wear them because even though they were not designed for movement, they created a load. But even walking, it wasn't comfortable. But we knew the effect was there, and that was a part of the research that, I mentioned around microloading was you don't need excessive weight to get effect when your body is moving. So, and that came more from I said to you at the very beginning, this insight that why do you make a shirt super lightweight when the first thing you do when you work out is add load? Wait, if you go to a gym,
Yeah.
let's try to make it a little heavier so you get a little bit of effect from it, but you're changing nothing but what you wear. So we almost flipped it on his head and said, okay, this shirt is going to be 1 or 2 pounds, which is the same as an ankle weight or a wrist weight, but it's going to be comfortable. It's going to be washable. It's going to be beautiful. and you're going to get a little bit more effect from it. Now, it's not going to be as much effect if for certain movements as if you're having more load, but on the other hand, you're not impeding the motion. So over time, you build strength. So now you get into training, now you get into running, now you get into explosive movements. And that came more from intuition than, what exactly should it weigh? However, where we did spend time was where exactly should we put the weights? And we put them over the large muscle groups and the places of your body that are moving and distributed evenly. So that was more like looking at it so we could create optionality for our consumer, where it wasn't like we have one thing, we have a weighted vest, and you can walk in a straight line with it. It was saying, regardless of what your activity is, we have a product for you. And we worked really, really hard on making sure that over time, from a price point standpoint, the difference wouldn't be so big, so that if you were choosing about a known name brand to buy a training top, and you were choosing between them and us, we knew that if the difference was nominal, then the question would be, well, why wouldn't I? Like, why wouldn't I get a product that looks as good, or actually, in my view, better, has an innovation that actually gives me more back? Why wouldn't I do that? You know,
Yep.
and that's where and that's when the load can't be too big, because not everybody is okay with saying I'm going to load 10% of my body mass. That's a lot. If you're going to say I'm a 120-pound woman, I'm gonna wear a 12-pound vest. You're not going to There aren't that many people are going to go out running in that. But putting on a pair of tights that are 1 pound, you will see a lot of people doing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting the different, not only the different use cases, but I think about the benefit to the greater population, right? And I think this is one thing that I've really come to appreciate of getting to not only spend time with the product, but also some of the people of OMORPHO is that really similar on the Coya side. It doesn't feel like an occupation, but more a vocation. That this is something that is like deeply involved in the company and something that resonates on our side because I know that is how we come at this too, is like how can we impact the most people in a positive way, right? And one thing that microloading I think really does is vastly expands the impact because of being able to make it so that you may not be training as an elite athlete, but you can still make those kind of like incremental gains, right? And certainly, I'm sure that there's the financial benefit of creating a larger market and all that, but just from that standpoint of an impact standpoint, and as I say all of that, um, yeah, like where did that come in to play? Because I know from talking to so many people at OMORPHO in my time, there is like that is a factor, right? And I think that is really where there starts to become like a lot of alignment with what we're doing at Coya, which is why everything became so interesting for me of like how do we, what are we going to do with all this? But the the kind of intrinsic true, we can really impact a lot of people in a really positive health way.
Yeah, and it stems from our mission, right? Our mission is to make every human stronger. And and the reason we love it is because strength is like the bedrock of everything. Strength is at the foundation for athletes who are breaking world records, and strength is at the foundation for people who seek longevity, to live, long, happy, healthy lives. And there's so much research on this, and I think in the past few years there have been much more focus around this, especially because it's almost had a bad rap. Strength used to be a dude in a corner with a dumbbell. It's like, yeah, I got to be strong because I want to look good on the beach. It, yeah, that's okay, but it is so much bigger, as an idea. When you look at, there are so many amazing podcasts on the subject that talk about it, and obviously all about this is it is so important to understand the importance of it. And it's so logical too. But then we said, well, if we can do our little piece and help make every human just a little bit stronger, that's pretty remarkable and it's inspiring. And we come from a point of passion. This is, yes, of course we want to make this and we know it's going to become a big company, but that's not where we start. I don't think any big company starts by the objective is that. The objective needs to be create something that you love and and are passionate about and that you believe brings something meaningful to people, and then by its nature it's going to grow, and it's going to become, because you're bringing something valuable to a lot of people, then you grow bigger. And I think the idea of strength is democratic, and sometimes right in front of a lot of people, and they're missing out on an opportunity to do it because for whatever reasons there might be things that are obstacles, like maybe you don't have money, maybe you feel the perception that you don't have time, maybe you just can't get going. And we want to span this all the way from giving elite athletes the edge to win a gold medal to someone who helps someone get off the couch and just say, just, you know what? Just throw on our vest and go for a walk. And I can guarantee and do it, do it, and it'll be the thing that kind of gets you over the hump.
Yeah, it's certainly something that like we believe and have built our business around the concept of health, wellness, all the way up to performance at its core is doing the basics really, really well repeatedly, right? Is like being able to just do the basics really well repeatedly. And I think honestly, like that is actually the secret to high performance. I think people think about high performance as like they have some sort of secret thing that they're doing that we don't know yet that's allowing them to do that. And really it's just that they're just considerably more consistent at doing the basics at a very high level. And I think that's
Yeah.
true across sport, across business. Like I think that is kind of a universal thing that taking that concept and saying, you know what, you could actually you could do that. You could do this at the same level. Like you might not run as fast as Michael Johnson, but you could almost essentially train in a really similar manner. He doesn't take a day off, right? He doesn't take a day off, and his form is what it has to be. And so that just takes a certain like mindset around it. And I think um, that's definitely how we come at when we come at all of this from a health and wellness standpoint. And I think what microloading it allows is that to become almost more attainable for so many people that like I can do this every day. Now all of a sudden like I
Yeah.
can add something more day in and day out, and all of a sudden, man, I've done this for a month. Look at this.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. And we talk about it through the lens of like simplify the pursuit of a fit life. How do you make it easier for someone? If we told you all you have to do is throw this on and go for a walk for 15, 20, 30, 40 minutes, that's not, it's harder to tell someone you have to change your life. It's like, what's the least amount of uncomfortable change that you can do to get incremental change that create good habits? We all know the importance of that. But it can, to a lot of people, it seems like, oh, I'm just too far from it, and if
Yep.
you can lower that barrier of entry and help more people come on board, while at the same time help elite athletes and performance seekers get the edge, then you really have something truly remarkable. And that's what's so amazing about our product collection is when you have NBA running backs come to us and say, I run routes in this because it preps me for the season. And then at the same time, you have someone who's, you know, 70 years old and goes like, this has really helped me with my osteopenia. That's pretty cool. Like you can span the gamut from elite performance to longevity seekers.
Yeah, there's definitely nothing better, I think, on our side of hearing like yeah, everything's going better. Like I can't quite put my finger. I'm not like doing anything really different. It's just like everything is like okay, then that's you did it right. Then we have something that's
Yeah,
sustainable, right? That we have something that's
yeah,
sustainable.
yeah.
Um, you mentioned some of the pro athletes from the runners, and then you just mentioned some of the football players. Yeah, maybe how has this been received at like at the highest level, right? I think it makes sense for losers like me who just walk around and do those sort of things. But like, what about like at the highest level? Like, how has the feedback been? How are they utilizing it?
I mean, it's really interesting. You would think when we talk about this, I think, but usually when I get the opportunity to explain, most people are like, well, that makes so much sense. Why aren't more people, why isn't everybody using this? And there is an interesting e- perception that you have to work on changing, and it takes a fair bit of time, right? Because as I said, weighted vests have been around forever. They lived in a pretty specific segment of strength sports, and where you could handle lots of load. And it was more sort of in a gym setting or in the military, where it makes complete sense, right? Or if you're a firefighter and you have to carry lots of load, it makes tons of sense to train with load because your body is just being, stressed much more. But for a lot of elite athletes, when you look at other sports, they obviously there's a lot of load on their body, so they can't really handle these massive amounts. And and although the simple idea of microloading makes sense, you have to go through a few layers to get to them, right? Some athletes in themselves are just curious and they go, I don't need my team strength and conditioning coach to tell me to use this because I see it.
Yeah.
And they will come directly and they'll legit implement it themselves. But to a lot of people, there are coaches, they have trainers, they have teams, and if they don't tell them to use it, they don't use it because they trust them as they should. And they in turn, it takes time for this to sink in. And although it's intuitive, a lot of people have philosophies that they believe in and they're not 100% sold on it. They're like, well, I don't know. I want to do my own research. Do you have more white papers? I want to see the evidence. So all these things takes time. And then we have some people who are incredibly well known and have fully embraced it and put microloading to amazing use. Stu McMillan, legendary sprint coach, and he very early on he asked us for products. Say, hey, I want to use this in my training, because I see where it works. But it takes time. It as with everything, I remember starting when I was back in the early day when I was at Nike, we worked a lot on sensing when we talked about digital innovation, and we worked on all sorts of sensing, for athletes in motion, elite athletes. And at the time, soccer teams started wearing a little pod in this harness that could measure speed, distance, acceleration, overall workload. And this is a long time ago. This is 20 years ago, and it was this huge skepticism, and we had solutions for it too. And teams were like, "Well, why? And how do I use it? And what should I do?" There isn't a team today that doesn't use it, and because they've understood how to use it, I believe we're seeing the same thing with microloading. It just takes time because people need to get used to the idea, and even really, really renowned coaches, trainers, people in the strength and conditioning space are kind of going, yeah, I don't think 2 pounds will make any difference because intuitively they think it won't. And then when they start using it and they see the data, they go, oh, I was wrong. But that's going to take a couple more years. But it's the innovators among the athletes who come to us. Sometimes we have agents calling us up and go, I don't even know what you do, but my athlete told me I should do a deal with you because they want the gear. And we happily send them the gear. But it's a journey and it's a process, and sometimes quite surprised that there isn't, people don't understand it quicker. It's more everyday people are quicker at going, yeah, of course I'm going to throw on a weighted vest when I go for a walk. Why wouldn't I? I'm walking anyway,
Yeah.
and then you have in the elite layer of athletes, we have some teams, that wear it in training and have seen result improvements, and they don't want to tell other teams about it because they feel like it's their secret weapon.
I want to get to a couple questions I saw that come in, and I'll kind of try to hit as many of these as we can. Do you have a feel for how much somebody should wear the vest on a given day? Like, is there an upper limit? Is there like don't wear it that much? Which I think is actually a good question because sometimes like it is kind of like so easy. Sometimes I'll be like, oh man, I've had this on for like a couple hours of my day, and is there such thing as
Yeah.
that?
E- uh, Again. it's like it's like asking every runner in the world, how much should I run? And then the answer will be, it depends.
Yeah.
What is your objective? Where are you in life? In what shape are you? What's your goal? And some people can handle running, as you know, a marathon a day. And other people can run 3 miles twice a week. So it's the same with the vest. We have physicians, actually, some here in Portland, who wear the vest all day under their uh what's it called, what the physician wears, like the
Yeah.
white coat, whatever they wear.
Yeah.
Because they feel like, I don't have time to work out, but I'm walking up and down the corridors all day. I'm wearing it all day. And that was the 10 pounder. When you get to things like the how much is enough, or what is enough, it always comes back to what makes you feel comfortable. Start in a safe space and build from it. For me, it's like I just love, I wear my 10 pounder in the gym and 20 sometimes when I do certain movements. I always wear my 20 when I do my walks, but that can be an hour. Then I take it off and then I'm done.
Mhm.
I rarely wear it all day. And we have other people on the team who love wearing it longer periods of times, but it all comes down to your individual needs. It's like everything you guys do with Coya as well. It means you have to understand the need of a certain person to say, here's what we think would be good for you. It's really hard to prescribe and say it should be this many hours or that many hours.
Yeah, I think it's so much in fitness, meeting that person where they are and trying to figure out the exact right next step for them.
Yeah,
That's actually really what creates momentum, right? That's actually really
yeah,
what creates momentum. Um, a question came in about gravitostat hypothesis and looking at and asking kind of maybe your take on that from the concept of kind of the body regulating its weight and fat through kind of like a built-in kind of like gravity located. I think it's mostly located like in the legs. Like when you add weight, how does that affect the body's perception of its own body fat? Um, yeah, now, do you have thoughts on that
yeah.
or like have looked into yeah,
Yeah, I don't, yeah, I read about that. It was, I think it's used a lot in weight loss, like where you're basically
right.
replacing every weight, all the weight you lose, you replace with weight in order to, and I really can't speak to that. I think that, we're, we're trying to keep it simple, right? And you can go and veer off into so many areas here, and I just don't feel like I know enough about it to talk about it in an informed way, and I don't want to guess, so I'll probably steer clear from that.
Uh, I think that there's a question in here that I kind of like almost want to answer, but I'll get your take on it. The question is basically like the right place to start when looking at weighted gear, weighted vest, rucks, all that sort of thing. Like as you know and as you alluded to, like obviously we believe in really like let's figure out where you are because that's going to be a different starting point because everyone's at a different starting point, which is great. Um, and I would say that uniquely that there's the ability with microloading now as opposed to just going to a ruck is that you can start from less and always add more. You're just you're going to run into a lot less trouble going that direction than overshooting and having to like maybe come back. But I'm sure that's a question that you get and like just where do I start or where's the kind of the on ramp for this?
Yeah, 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 and they're the beauty of the way that we've created our platform, if you will, we think of it as a strength enhancing platform, is that you can step up over time. And some people have a very clear understanding of it, and a lot of people read, it should be 10% of my body mass, which is a pretty common it's a pretty common stat out there as it pertains to walking, is that it should be roughly 10% of your body weight, um, which can be is in the zone, right? But I do think that the question is, again, we've been harping on this, right? It all depends on where you are, in your journey and in your life, and in your general health and strength and fitness and what your objectives are. But the beauty of the way we've built the platform is we have these, the adjustable G packs where you can, for men, you can go all the way from 6 to 20 pounds. So we have our running vest, which is 6 pounds, that you can add weights up to 16, or you buy our GS Icon, which starts at 10 and goes to 20. And for women, the same thing is it goes from, from 6 to 13, or from 3 to 9. And that allows you to say, where do I feel comfortable beginning? And you don't have to buy, you can buy the packs later, so you can start with a lighter weight. In general, though, it's if your only activity is just, walking, most people can actually handle up to the upper level of that pretty comfortably. And we see that over and over again. But I read a lot, I read every single review we get. We get a lot of reviews where people go, you know, I'm so excited that I started because our in the beginning our vest wasn't adjustable. It's like, I got your first vest, I wore it for a year and a half, and now I've evolved, and I've gotten myself into a shape where I got the new one with the fully loaded weights, and I feel so much stronger. But I took the time to ease into it. And again, depending on where you are, that is the idea is that you pick something you feel comfortable with. And the thing about our gear is, you can get the full pack and then not using the additional weights from the beginning. Just start wearing until you feel comfortable and your body is used to it. And then you just snap in. It takes 5 seconds to snap in more weights and then move with more weight. So that's kind of how we see it. Start where you're comfortable and then move up. And then the other thing that happens a lot is this thing that, oh, well, this is nothing, throw it on, and then I'm gonna go for a 5 mile walk, and then 3 miles, like, oh man, this is
Yeah.
really, really heavy, because it takes time. I always have this analogy that where I say, when people say on our apparel, they go, oh, I don't think it's enough. I go, do me a favor, grab this short. It's a 2 pound short. It's like, well, it weighs nothing. Okay, now hold both your arms out. One hand you have nothing, and the other hand you have our 2 pound short. Stand like that. And then, and then I just observe them. And it doesn't take long before one hand starts trembling. It feels like nothing until time and distance become an element, right? And I think that's how to think about it.
Yeah, I think yeah, I think that's so good. And my personal experience with it um has definitely been feels like nothing when you put it on. So easy to then go do. And then when I come back from even like my walk with my kids or whatever, and I take it off, it's like the lighter and also the like, ooh, my legs, I feel more than I anticipated on that one. Last few minutes, I want to let everybody know who's chiming in here. The OMORPHO team has been super kind to be able to extend a discount to everybody on our side. I'll make sure that goes out in with the recording of this to everybody, so that if you want to look into some of that stuff, and in general, I think our position at Coya, like, we want to help people sift through all of the noise that's out there, and I will say that, like, without a doubt, this is some of the best of things that I've utilized, both from a research perspective at Stanford to putting things into practice in coaching, and also in what we're doing at Coya. Like, we've seen it not only in people's anecdotal experience, but also in the wearable data, looking at that. So, on all sides of that. And so I'm so happy to be able to make, kind of introduce our audience to you in your brand, and what the science is around doing that. And so, oh yeah, thanks, Luke. Popped the discount code into the chat as well.
Yeah.
And so,
And likewise, Nick, I mean, I think we love these types of connections because we people who share the same passion for adding contributing something meaningful in this space. And it goes both ways. So, I really appreciated the time.
yeah, definitely. Hopefully, we will get to talk soon. And we'll make sure that we put all that in the link as well. And also, Also a great social media follow. The with the OMORPHO squad, they always got good pictures of people doing stuff in the vest and can inspire you to get out and get moving. So,
Yeah.
but I appreciate you, man. Have a good rest of the
Yeah.
week.
Thank you. Thank you so much for great questions and to everyone who was watching, listening. It's been a pleasure.
We'll talk soon. See ya.
Yeah. Take care. Bye now.